Thank you.
so much. Thank you. No one tampered with my profile, which is good to know. I didn't know that was a thing. Cool. Well, I'm happy to be here. Nice to be the stopgap between you and an auto tour / alcohol experience. So let's hope I can keep you entertained for the next few minutes. All right. So I'm from Australia. Who's been? The rest of you, I feel very sorry for you. You're missing out. It's a very beautiful place. I grew up there in Sydney by the beach. Love the beach. Other people like the beach? Great. Well, when I was growing up, we had a problem that meant going to the beach became less fun, and that was called the hole in the ozone layer. I think that half of this room is old enough to remember exactly what was going on in the 80s when we discovered that there was a giant growing hole that was essentially making it very unfun to go to the beach because you had to lather yourself with sunscreen to protect your skin. Now, the hole in the ozone layer above Australia was particularly bad, still is quite bad, and it meant that, of course, we had an increase in skin cancers and all sorts of other health impacts. Now, who knows what's happened with the hole in the ozone layer? What's happened? It's gone back. We started to fix it. It's amazing. Nobody, if you speak to any teenager today, they will have absolutely no idea what you're talking about if you say hole in the ozone layer. When I was 5 years old, I first heard about it in the back seat of my mum's friend's car, and I never forget this. She told me that there was this giant hole where that the sun was going to penetrate through it and we were all going to burn to death. She was not a good parent. I was so scared. I remember it so distinctly. My little innovation mind came up with 3 solutions. One was we could build giant sunshades. Apparently that wasn't going to work. 2, we could hide under blankets. Or 3, we could just never, ever go outside again. Now, of course, none of these things were really going to work. But as a 5-year-old, I thought I was pretty bloody smart. But I was also very scared. Very, very, very scared. And I think, to be honest, it's one of the things that drove the rest of my career into sustainability. Now, hydrofluorocarbons, CFCs, they created the problem. A lot of them were in the heating and cooling systems that we needed in order to refrigerate and obviously deal with modern living. How is it that we managed to reverse this hole in the ozone layer so well? Well, I was actually fortunate enough in some really weird turn of events in life, 5-year-old Leyla meet 35-year-old Leyla. 30 years later, I was invited to host a panel at the 30th anniversary of the Montreal Protocol, which is where the signatory to solve the hole in the ozone layer happened. And that's me with 9 of the world's environment ministers, me being all cool Australian lady. But I got to ask them, why was it so successful? Because here we are facing all of these other global challenges. And this is by far the most successful international collaboration to solve an environmental issue that's ever happened. And the thing that they told me was collaboration. That and also the rich countries paid for the poor countries, which helps. But one of the key things was that there was a willingness between industry and government to collaborate on the solutions. And that is really one of the key things to success in life, not just in the EU situation. When we collaborate, we have rich, diverse experiences. And that's something that I think that we forget. When it comes to sustainability, we still end up in our siloed mindsets and we think that we can just solve our own problem. But if you look to nature, one of the most successful things about nature, diversity. Diversity is what makes a natural system successful. And it's what makes a business successful as well. So I was named Champion of the Earth in 2016. It's an actual title. I can't believe it. I asked for a cape. The UN don't issue capes. Very unfortunate. But this meant that I have been able to continue to expand the work that I do around challenging people to think differently. And as was mentioned in my introduction, I actually am a serial social entrepreneur. I can't stop myself. My most recent project is a farm in Portugal. It's pretty crazy. It's a living learning laboratory. People come and learn how natural systems work. But I also run this international school called the Unschool. It's for adults. We take people who are career transitioning and we teach them tools for making change. And then I'm also the CEO of a design agency where we get invited, like the Finnish education system invited me to design a whole learning system for the high school sector there around equipping young people with the tools for the future, such as creative problem solving, systems thinking, and sustainability. So I'm very lucky and fortunate. I have a very different career, I think, than most of you. No? And I was invited here to really challenge you to think differently about this challenge in your sector, in your industry. So Here's the deal. There isn't one person on this planet who can't agree that making sure that we don't mess up the planet is not a good idea. Even the ones who want to move to Mars. Who wants to move to Mars? Anyone? It's really funny. I ask this question all the time. Yesterday, I got a lady, a CEO of a big company. She wants to move to Mars, but usually not most people are like, I mean, there's no oxygen there, so. But this idea of the circular economy, the transition that we're in, it's about moving to a system that is not only sustainable, sustaining itself, but is potentially regenerative. And I think this is where the big challenge and opportunity lies. So we live in a world that is constantly changing. The 500 BC philosopher Heraclitus said, there is only one thing in life that we know to be true, and that is change. No man can ever step into the same river twice, he said. Meaning you and I and the river are all constantly changing. And this is the reality of the world around us. It is changing. And some of those changes are not the best and some are incredible. Like the success that we've had with technology as a species is amazing, right? Like we literally live in the safest time in all of human history. It's incredible what we've managed to do. There are, unfortunately, some consequences to our actions, and that is where we're at right now. We're trying to figure out how to take stock of our successes and our losses and move forward into the future in a more progressive way so that all of us and our kids, the little people that we like, well, sometimes. I don't have any of my own, but I really like giving them back when I can. I really like little people. They're amazing. It's why I do what I do. And that's what I think most people could agree. That it is not just a responsibility, but it makes sense for us to ensure that the decisions we make as professionals and individuals not only do the right thing, but actually give back more than we take. And that's what the concept of regeneration is. And we're in this process right now of significant global shifts, right? So 3 of the big challenges that we face, obviously the climate crisis. Even if you don't believe in human-induced climate change, you cannot deny that something really weird is going on with the weather. And we have to do something about the impacts that that has. If you talk to anyone working in risk and policy at the moment, they'll be telling you about how the entire insurance industry is not going to insure you a beach house the same way as it used to because of the obvious threat of rising sea levels. We have social inequality and, of course, ecosystem destruction. These impact all of us. Because the thing that we forget as humans is that we are not independent of nature, we are interdependent with nature. Like, you cannot avoid it. You have to breathe. The 3 basic biophysical realities for being a human alive on this planet mean you need to eat food, drink water, and breathe air. And so we are all required to interact with the natural environment in some way. Full stop. You can't avoid it. You can take some pills, but you still need to breathe air. And this, to me, is the fascinating thing because it's almost like we forgot the fact that we are in an interconnected, interdependent relationship with phytoplankton and trees. If you don't believe me, you are welcome to hold your breath. It's physiologically impossible to self-suffocate by holding your breath, so go ahead, see what it feels like because you have this little trick in the back of your brain that'll kick in and make you suck in oxygen. And if any of you have been visiting any one of the locations around the world right now that is suffering from significant air pollution, you'll know how horrible it is when that gulp of oxygen is laced with all sorts of toxic chemicals. In fact, air pollution is one of the world's biggest killers right now. And this to me is insane because I was just myself visiting in Thailand for a project, and I, being an Australian, have visited Thailand many times in my life. But obviously I live overseas now and I had to go back, and I was really shocked at how significant the air pollution had increased in the last few years because of the industrialization. Now, on one hand, we've had a significant benefit to the country. The economic development is going to obviously have positive impacts. But at the same time, you have all of this science that's showing that the long-term social impact of exposure to toxic chemicals is significant, directly linked to dementia, for example. So the reality is that sustainability is not just about making sure that we do the right thing. It's about making sure that we don't ruin the potential possibility of our kids and our kids' kids to have the same, if not better, quality of life than we have today. And for me, that is one of the most important and beautiful challenges that we have in front of us. How do you do business? How do you be successful and not destroy the systems that sustain us? That's the challenge. That's the challenge of our time. And of course, it doesn't just rely on business and industry. Government and individuals are responsible for working together. But the key thing here is that we need to shift the way we value things in the economy. We need to change the way we understand what this often confusing, somewhat overused, and annoying word of sustainability. Because for me, I've been working in this space for a long time. I know I look really young, but it's a long time. And essentially what I've learned over the last almost 20 years doing this is that people avoid things that they don't really understand. And sustainability has been a victim of that, not really understanding what it means. And for me, it's really simple. We live on one planet. It has a certain amount of resources of which we pull out of the ground or shear off sheep or extract from the natural environment. And at some point, not too long ago, around about the 1980s, we started to extract and process those resources at a faster rate than the Earth could replenish them, therefore eating into the capital of future generations. This graph demonstrates what's called Earth overshoot. Basically, sustainability's red line, green line, marry them up, we're all good. That's essentially what we're looking to do. It's not that complicated. However, this is what's called Earth Overshoot Day. Every single year since the 1970s, we have been decreasing the time that this occurs, meaning as of last year, the 31st of June, 31st of June was when we ate up all of the resources allocated to us for that year. So from June to December, right now, we are eating the resources dedicated to future generations. And so that's really where the challenge lies, is like how to rectify this inconsistency. And for me, it's a massive opportunity. It's an opportunity not to just change the way we do business and to change the way we organize society, but to also solve problems, because otherwise, work is boring. Seriously, if you've got to work every day and there are no problems, what would you do? Surf the internet? That also gets boring, turns out. So ultimately, this challenge, these global challenges that we face, they're an incredible opportunity. However, we do have this collective problem, which is that all of us, not just you guys, everybody in the world has been taught to think in a particular way through the education system. It's called reductive thinking. It's how we manage our businesses. And unfortunately, reducing the world down to individual manageable parts is very good for certain things, not good for understanding the complex dynamic systems that we're interacting with. This reductive thinking has created the linear economy, the economy that we all benefit from. However, this take, make, waste system of extracting, processing, and then landfilling or incinerating resources has created a significant amount of externalities. I was going to swear there, but I stopped myself. A certain metric ton of externalities. Externalities are the products of the linear economy. And this is the crazy thing about waste or pollution, is that the people who benefit from creating those externalities are not the ones who suffer the consequences. And that's how we've managed to get to this point where the deflection of responsibility has been like all over the world. It's been really easy to do it. But now the world has become a lot smaller, right? And there's 7.5 billion humans. We're going to get to about 9 to 10 billion. And we still need to figure out how to not eat into the capital resources of future generations. So externalities are one of the key points. So the thing is that we have a finite set of resources that we need to be not only more efficient and effective at using them, but we also need to figure out how to deal with the infinite desire of humans. I'm a sociologist, as was mentioned. I love exploring the incredible complexity and often stupidity of the human mind. We are a mess. We're a beautiful mess, but we are a mess. We are riddled with cognitive biases, something called cognitive dissonance. Do you know what that is? Yeah? When you think one thing, you do another thing. When you realize there's a gap, you go, oh, I'm not going to change my behavior. I'll just change the way I think. This explains a lot. And this is all being manipulated by the technology and things around us. But when we look at this from a big picture perspective, right, when we get out of our reductive mindsets, we see that nature, the thing that we are all part of, that we rely on, it's got a really good system. That system is regeneration. Every single thing in nature has a value that is reused in some way. In fact, humans are the only species on the planet that creates an actual waste, something that cannot be metabolized by another part of the system, right? That is the most insane thing about our industrial system, is that we create something that has no value. And for me, this is the travesty, because what we've done is we've made an incredible society, but it's based on exploitation. And this is the point where we can start to shift, and we are, it's already happening, it's amazing, to systems of regeneration. Businesses, cities, entire countries, they can be regenerative, not just exploitative. And of course, this is the pathway set out by the Sustainable Development Goals in 2015 from the United Nations. But let me ask you a question here, because I think when I talk about this stuff, it's often like big picture. Let's bring it down to you guys. Who here likes seafood? Someone's like half up there. No one doesn't like seafood. I'm a vegetarian. I regret not eating seafood. I just know too much. Seafood's delicious. Unless you're allergic, then it's deathly. So these three things have something in common, and it's related to the oceans. Can anyone guess? I'll tell you what they are. So one, it's like body products. The other is outdoor clothing. And the last one is tires. Can anyone guess what connects these and has a negative impact on the ocean? Plastic, yes, but what type of plastic? Oh, you guys are smart. Microplastics, very good. Did you know that car tires are the biggest contributor to ocean microplastics because they go bald? I was really like, my mind was blown when I heard that because, of course, all roads lead to the ocean. So the deal with microplastics, we know that there are significant macro, large pieces of plastics floating around the ocean, and that's a huge issue. But the microplastics, this is fascinating. Now, studies of table salt around the world have shown that nearly all table salts are contaminated with microplastics, which makes sense because salt comes from the ocean unless it comes from the Himalayan mountains. So we're all ingesting microplastics, not only in our seafood, but also in our salt. And a recent study, and I will say it was only of 8 people, but I still think it's relevant to mention, a recent study showed that it ended up in everyone's poop. Because the thing is that we are part of a system, and that system is we metabolize natural resources to create energy. And plastic is going to end up riddled throughout our entire food chain. And these are the kinds of challenges that we are now starting to learn. And in fact, the whole microplastics thing, it's like 3-4 years that the science has actually shown that this is the issue. And so we really have to start to take a different approach to the way we meet our needs, the way we do business. And for me, this is about redesigning the entire system. The world is designed, full stop. From the moment you are born to the moment you die, every single second of your life, you interact with the designed world. It is not just about how pretty something looks or how functional something is, but the entire world is designed, and we in turn design it. I call it the silent social scripter. And there's a really great place to remember this, and that is when you are walking through the airport, which I feel is designed badly anywhere in the world, and you have to go through when there's nobody there, but they still have all of the lines, like when you're going to, and you're like this, and you're like, this is so stupid. But there's an intent there. It's not just to manage people. It's also to make you realize who's in control, right? These are all systems of design. This is the way the world works. Design is one of the most important and influential creations of humanity. It designs the world. We design it. It creates all sorts of incredibly beautiful solutions to complex problems and also creates a lot of complex problems. Like, look at what's happened in the last decade. And yes, the first iPhones really only hit the market just over a decade ago. It's crazy to think. We have created systems of addiction. It's called dark patterning or dark design. It's where all user experiences, whether it be websites such as Amazon or your phone and the apps that are on there, are designed to cognitively manipulate your interaction. So Facebook's continuous scroll is based off a slot machine, has the same dopamine rewards every time you do this as if you were pulling a slot machine. The guys who developed the little red, the little red notification button that you get when you have someone who likes something or has messaged you, he refuses to let his kids use the technology because he designed that and he knows how incredibly addictive it is and how the neuroreceptors in our brains are so easily manipulated by flashing colors and when you're booking a hotel and it's like 5 of the people just booked this and you're like, oh, I'm going to miss out. That's all intentional. It's all designed to direct your experience, to fleece you of money, but to also to keep you engaged longer. And the thing is that all of these technologies, they're by design. Trust me, these are very intentional decisions by very smart people. And so we have all of these design failures, whether it be ocean plastic waste or manipulative technology. But one of my favorites has to do with something that is a universal connector of all humans, and that is food. I've yet to meet people who don't like some type of food, nor don't need it. So food. Did you know that who knows how much food we waste as a species globally? How much? 40? Well, that is a good, very medium. It's between 1/4 and half of all food produced. So 40%? There you go. By consumers, 40%. So globally, we waste up to half of all food produced. So, but at the point of consumption, it's 40%. Why do you think it is? What do you think the main cause of you guys and me and everybody else wasting food? To start with, it has a huge impact to produce food on carbon emissions, 20% of global agriculture. I blame it on the refrigerator. I'll tell you why. Because this thing here, so-called crisper drawer, doesn't keep things crisp, does it? Makes them go soggy, like your lettuces and your carrots. Everybody's had this happen. Why is that? Anyone? There are no molecular chemists in the room? Basically, it's like when you're on an aeroplane for a really long period of time and your skin goes really dry, that's what's happening to your lettuces. Essentially, the crisper drawer, it's not a closed environment, and so all of that cold air circulating around the refrigerator is sucking out the moisture from the cells of the vegetables, so they go limp or soggy. So what I find fascinating is that this design, that actually hasn't really changed much since the 1950s when you really think about it, we take up all of this real estate in our house and we pay for this thing to be on to do one thing alone, keep food fresh. That's the whole point of a refrigerator, right? And what does it do? Not keep food fresh. I mean, some food. Or the fact that they got so big and you lose things at the back of them now. There are all of these design failures that have meant that we as consumers are essentially wasting significant amount of food. There's a really quick fix to this, right? Redesign the refrigerator. The thing is that when we look at technology or innovation or the changes that are happening in society, we value the wrong things completely. We don't think about how we could transition from this waste-focused society to one that is circular and sustainable. And the thing is that when we look at the circular economy, yeah, sure, it's all about remanufacturing and managing the end of life. But the most important thing about the circular economy is redesigning the systems that we already exist within. We need to redefine value. Because, unfortunately, there is no way. This is the funny thing about planet Earth. Everything stays on planet Earth except for space junk, which is a really serious problem. You should Google image search space junk. It's really fascinating. The thing is, though, is that if we create something, it needs to have some life. At some point, it'll either end up in the oceans, it'll either end up in somebody's drawers. Whatever we create, it's going to stay on the planet. And because we haven't created like nature, we've created like linear humans, we essentially design things to be wasted. And what we've done in the last 50 to 60 years is we've normalized a waste-based society. It is so normal to create waste right now. In fact, this is the landfill sites in the US since just after the Second World War. And we know that recycling is broken. Like for a long time, we've known that the waste system isn't really doing what it should do. But who knows what happened 18 months ago? Some very big thing happened in the recycling industry. You are my best friend over there. What did you, pre-read my slides? Yeah! What do you got, psychic powers? This is creepy. Okay, yes, China decided to stop taking the world's recycling. And why this mattered was because in 20 years, we moved from having recycling in a lot of different locations to being centralized in China, partly because all of those empty container ships, right, that had brought the stuff could now be filled up with the recycling sent back to China. And it's kind of a good system until essentially the rate of production of disposable products was so high, the contamination rate was too high, and China also developed a local market for disposable products. So they have their own waste management systems that they need to manage. So this issue, though, what it's done is it's really created a huge problem in the recycling industry. Like basically, if you recycle right now, I really hate this to break it to you, it's very unlikely that what you put in the recycling will be recycled. It's really sad, and this is just very new. Most Western countries, I don't know what Belgium's like. You have, I don't know what it is here. Are you guys from Belgium, or you're just visiting from other places? Visiting. Okay, well, I know the UK, I know Canada, I know Australia, landfilling right now their recyclables. In Australia, where we have a 65% rate of recycling, people are really into it. A lot of the local councils got busted basically landfilling their recyclables. And I met with one of the council members and they're like, well, we're just going to go and dig it up later when the market comes back. Which I think is a very interesting solution, but also kind of demonstrates the absurdity of the situation we're in, right? Okay, so recycling is not part of the solution. What we need to do is we need to move beyond focusing on waste, and we need to start to redesign different systems. But here's the thing, like I said, humans, we're a bit weird. We have all of these cognitive biases. So the human brain responds to information based on experiences, and most of us have one significant experience, and that is that when we encounter something that we're scared of, or that is overwhelming, or that we don't understand the details of, we ignore it. It's a much, much, much easier thing to do than actually face it. And of course, we also have this combined with one other problem, which is called a negativity bias, where when we encounter negative information, it is neurologically double the impact as a positive experience. So if you walk out of here and you lose 50 euros, you will have it sting you longer than if you found 50 euros. This is just a known universal fact. So when you combine these two things of like climate crisis and ocean plastic waste and the Amazon's burning and recycling's broken, it's like pretty overwhelming. Now, you guys are probably smart enough to see through that, but if you're a 17-year-old seeing this on Facebook every day, how do you think you feel about your future? About what prospects and opportunities lie on your path? This is the reality of the situation we're in now. One of the big problems is that we are stuck in this status quo, this hyperconsumption, waste focus, recycling will fix it. That's all bullshit. Basically, we need to redesign the way we do business. We need to redesign the relationships that we have with the natural systems that sustain us. And unless we can do that, then we're just going to keep creating the problems. But the cool thing is that this is already happening. The shifts are underway. The cultural changes are the train's left the station. So for right now, it's either you're on board or you're going to get dragged along in the slipstream. So the key thing here is to think differently about the problems, to take a different perspective. To think not as you, but as the person who can help solve this. Because when you look at, say, strategic innovation or the movements that are occurring now in business, one of the key things is overcoming internal inertia and that resistance. Oh, it's not my problem. We don't do this stuff. Sustainability, environmental stuff, it's someone else's problem. But it's not. It's all of our problems. And this is the most important thing. If you remember one thing from the Crazy Australian, is you've got to figure out how to disrupt your own industry. Otherwise, you're going to get dragged behind. Because the changes are inevitable, not just because of the global crises in front of us, but also because there's a whole other generation who are about to come up into the workforce who are like, you know what, guys? You ruined everything. Now it's our turn. What, you hear about the kids protesting? I mean, what kid in their right mind is not going to take a Friday off school? But also, genuinely, if you speak to most teenagers and young people, they are concerned about the future because they have been exposed to this content for their whole lives. So what we need to do is we need to find ways of designing from the entire system. And the industry that you guys are in are important because you're all the way back down the beginning of the supply chain. And actions at your end can help to really dramatically impact what happens further down the supply chain. So basically, the whole point of sustainability is to revalue the way we move materials through the economy and to find ways of not just having an end-of-life management plan for those materials, but to dramatically change the relationships that we have with them and how they're used. So we've got things like industrial symbiosis and interesting case of habitat integration. But realistically, this is going to require so much more challenges. And I'll give you some examples. So circularity has become a mega trend. Some of the biggest companies in the world are starting to, have completely taken this on. So IKEA, carbon positive, by 2030, full circularity within their entire supply chain. You have not only IKEA, but Lego, who are moving off plastic, which is fascinating. Who doesn't love Lego? You have Unilever, who just did this incredible collaboration in the US called Loop, which is a full service delivery of like your Haagen-Dazs ice cream coming in reusable packaging. They actually are just launching it in Paris as well. So if anyone lives in Paris, you can sign up for this. You can get your ice cream and your cleaning products all delivered in a closed loop system. And the thing is this kind of thinking, this is about shifting from that linear and rigid thinking to the systems mindset. And a systems mindset is where you figure out what part of the system can be shifted to change the rest. And if you're not familiar with the concept of systems thinking, 1950s, MIT helped build cybernetics and the internet. But now we're using systems thinking to understand complex problems like the environmental issues that are in front of us. And one of the key ideas of systems thinking is that everything is interconnected and there is no blame. A system is dynamic, it's constantly changing. The choices you make within that system will have consequences. And that's really the the power of approaching business challenges like this. Because when you look at it, you see that it's all about relationships. It's not about the obvious part of the system. Most people attempt to solve a problem with the reductive mindset by looking at just the obvious bit, the tip of the iceberg, the stuff we can see. They don't see all of the weight that holds that up. And deep down, underneath any problem, is always an ideology or a mindset. And if we can change the way we see the world, our relationship with it, and especially around sustainability, not just someone else's problem, but a collective challenge that if we address, we can actually move into the future in a positive way, so that the solutions that we come up with today are not more problems for more people to deal with tomorrow. Because unless you're willing to be changed, somebody else will change you. And for me, this is a funny thing. Like, I work with industry all over the world. I work with government, and I work with 5-year-olds. You pick who's my favorite. The 5-year-olds are the best. They're all like, butterflies, I love them. But the thing about industry, what I find really funny is you have industries who are really going to just fight for relevance. And one of my favorite stories of this, and it's very aptly placed since we're in the Automobile Museum, is with the horse and cart industry. When the T Ford came out, the head of the horse and cart industry in New York got up at their annual general meeting and said that, make no mistake, everybody, the horse and cart industry is going nowhere. It's not like they're going to be able to put a fuel station on every corner. And within 5 years, they were dead. The same thing was said 10 years ago about electric vehicles. So this unwillingness to see the future and to be stuck in the status quo is a really dangerous place to be. The future involves sustainability, and it will be regenerative. Otherwise, it will not include us. And so here's my quick 5-step plan for you all. You have to have a vision, and that vision needs to be something that people can align to. If you can't get people interested in your story about where you want to go and what solution you can be a part of, they're not going to get on board. And then the most important thing, ideas have to have action. The amount of people I speak to who have great ideas and they don't take action, it's pointless. And from that, we have transformation. And the thing for me is that no matter what problem that we face as a species throughout all of human history, we've managed to overcome them. So for me, this is an amazing opportunity because the future is undefined. This guy over there is the only one who knows what's going to happen next because he's got some psychic skills. But the rest of us laymen's, we don't know what the future holds. So here's my last thing to challenge you before we get to have a nice, refreshing cocktail of some description and look at cars, is this. Do you guys know who Nobel is? What's he famous for? Dynamite and the Nobel Peace Prize. Very good. Most people don't know he's famous for dynamite. You guys are a unique audience for that one, I'm sure. But so Nobel basically, the thing about Nobel is that he was a very wealthy, very successful man. But he wasn't very well liked. And unfortunately, there was an accident where his brother passed away in Cannes, and a French newspaper released an article where they thought it was him. And essentially what happened was it stated that the king of, something to the effect of the king of death is dead. And he read that, and he had a kind of like extremely painful realization that when he died, nobody was going to care about him or anything he'd done. So as a result of that, he donated 97% of his wealth to the Nobel Prizes. And most people, except for you, that's what they remember him by, because he made a choice to give back something more than he took. And that's something I challenge you to think about in your work and in your professional role in the world, because the challenges that we have in front of us, whether it be climate change or ocean plastic waste, these aren't going to go anywhere. They're going to get worse unless we all change the way we see the problem, we start to work to solve them. So I thank you so much for your time, and I challenge you to think over drinks on how you can make those small shifts within your industry, within your work, to help bring about a more sustainable and regenerative future. Thank you so much.